Hello everyone and welcome to your webinar teaching today. I'm Serena, I'm a GP based in South West London and I'm joined by Colin. Colin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Colin Hoare from BHP Chartered Accountants Healthcare Partner. We're dealing with about 90 GP practices and around 400 locum GPs across the country.
So what I'd first like to start with is, can you all just post in the chat box, which should be to your right, you can put in your name, your ST, what level ST you are, and can you hear and see us okay, while we wait for everybody else to navigate their log on. So just your name in the chat box, whether you're ST1, 2 and 3, because that helps us pitch the content right, and can you hear and see us okay, just so we don't do a whole hour's webinar and not realize that you couldn't see anything. So I'll just wait for you guys to post that. Great, so hi Jigger, ST3, great, you can hear us loud and clear. Shazad, ST1, Louis, ST2, great, everyone can see and hear us. Naraja, ST3, great. So we're going to give everyone a few minutes to log on and then Colin's going to get started. I've got, yeah, more people logging on. So hi, those people are just logging on now. Just put your name and your, whether you're ST1, 2 or 3 in the chat box. Arpa, hello, yep, great. Bav, hi Bav. Izogi, I hope I pronounced that right, ST1, welcome. Great, so Colin, we'll give them a couple of minutes to log on because there's still a few people to go. And then you can take it away. So while you guys are logging on, I've done a poll here, which would be really good for you guys to fill in. I think I've got to post it again. What I'd like to know is, what job are you looking for post CCT? Because the first part of this webinar is Colin going through everything you need to know about your finances, claiming expenses, and I'm going to talk to you about, especially those that are kind of ST2s going into their reg year, ST3s that are finishing, kind of what to do now, like how to get started. And if you've got any particular concerns or things that you really want to know about, this webinar is completely interactive. Use the chat box. You can ask us a question privately if you don't want it to be on the group, or you can put it out to the whole group. But I just want to make sure all your questions are answered going forward. So I'm just going to put the poll here, and then by then I think maybe we should get started after that. So that's the poll there. What job are you looking for? So if you can just post your replies and then we'll have a look at the answers. Oh, okay, some people have posted in the group. Lakdini, hello, nice to meet you. Partner salaried or salaried leading on to partner, salaried and locum. Okay, good. So we'll make sure we cover all of that. And I'd be really interested for the ST3s, have you found jobs already or are you looking for work? Like what's the situation for you in terms of Colin? Hello, Colin. Okay, so we do have a couple more people to go, but Colin, I might just hand it over to you because I know you've got to get on. So Colin's going to lead the first part and he's going to go through everything you need to know about managing your money, what expenses you can claim as trainees, what you need to think about, your AKC, CSA fees, and then I'm going to talk to you about the practicalities of life after VTS, looking for work and what to do now. Okay, right, take it away, Colin.
Okay, thanks, Serena. Hello, everybody. Just go through the advert there from our website. If you go onto the BHP website, this is all on there. There are 2 healthcare partners, myself on the right there and Jenny Hurst. We're dealing with about 95 GP practices across the country. So we're going to talk today about personal expenses, what you need to know about paying tax, when you actually start work, should you be a sole trader or a limited company if you become a locum, and then 1 or 2 other tips from a tax point of view. So for ST3s, this is almost immediately relevant. ST2's not far away. For the ST1s, it's useful knowledge for a year or so's time when you're looking around and thinking of jobs. So any questions at any point, just put them in the chat box and I will stop and answer the questions as we go through. So first of all, what expenses can you claim? There's a list of expenses down the left-hand side, starting with motor expenses, and then we get roll. So you can see GP, partner, and locum's much more flexible in what you can claim. As a salary GP, you're looking at motor expenses and professional subscriptions only. And then you can also claim for the capital costs such as motor vehicles, computer, and equipment, mainly if you're self-employed as a partner or a self-employed locum. Other points to note: if you're a partner in a practice, you have a personal expenses claim drawn up by the accountant to cover all these expenses, and that is always in line with the practice year end, which will vary across different practices. A lot of practices are March year ends. Personal expenses claims for a partner reduce their own tax liability and do not affect the other partner's tax position. If you're a self-employed locum, you'd need to keep all the expenses details as would a partner, but also bear in mind you need to keep details of income as well. And we normally draw locum statements up, that's fees less expenses for the year to 5th of April, because that's the tax year end. And then also as a self-employed locum, you'd need to keep copies of your NHS pension forms, which will either be GP solo forms for out of hours work or locum A&B forms, excuse me, if you're doing work in the surgeries. So the questions we normally get are, what are the rules for claims for previous tax year? So certainly this will affect all ST levels. What we normally do when we pick up locum clients when they qualify is do a back claim for the 3 previous years, and that avoids you getting onto the tax return system early. If you're looking to do your own claims, then you could ring HMRC and get your PAYE code adjusted. So you do have 3 years to go back and claim, so you don't have to do things immediately. Any equipment and medical books that you've bought during trading years, you can claim as a day one cost when you become a self-employed locum or a partner. Some of the equipment you'll be able to claim as a salary GP. And then claiming for exam fees is exactly the same as number 1 on the screen. You can either phone HMRC and get your PAYE code adjusted, or the accountant can do a back claim when you're up and running on the tax return system. You always need to keep evidence of expenses, even though you may not need to send them at this stage to HMRC. Everybody's subject to the system where there's a potential of a random tax enquiry. You need to produce the paperwork at that point to prove what's being claimed. So on screen now, we've got an example of a personal expenses claim, if I can use the whiteboard correctly. So we're looking here at an expenses claim for the year to March 19. So just keep following the black dots. We've got motor expenses there, starting with the 1385, total cost 2366. So this is a partner's expenses claim. This GP's told us he or she's doing 70% private use of the car. So we take 70% out, leaving a claim on the expenses claim of 710. And then in the year to March 19, indemnity costs were still at their high levels, and this individual paid £9,000, also had BMA and GMC costs. So total costs of 9868. And then if we go on, that's the top half of the page. And then if we look at the bottom half of the page, we've then got various small expenses, medical, books and periodicals, and course fees. Then we've got some computer costs, internet costs, and home telephone for anybody who's still got home telephone. Most of our clients now have mobile as opposed to home telephone. And then we're claiming the business use of mobile phones. So this client will have told us that they're using their mobile 90% for work. So we've claimed £184 for that. So the total of all the top half of the page, including indemnity and motor, and these figures going down the side there, if you add those up, they all come to 12,199. So that's the total expenses claim for this client for the year to March 19. And over and above that, we're also claiming what we call capital allowances. You don't need to worry about the technicalities of how it's claimed, but for this individual, it's led to these three figures being claimed for the year on the car, on equipment, medical equipment, and on the computer. So the total of those three figures, the business use that is, that we've calculated, is £838. So this individual gets tax relief on £838. So just going back on the expenses claim itself, there's a total of expenses at the bottom of the page, 12,199. That was the top half of the page, that's the bottom half. And then there's also a capital allowances claim of 12,838. So very roughly 13,000 of expenses to claim, and most of our GPs pay at 40%. So that's tax relief in excess of £5,000 by doing the claims. So your role there throughout is keeping information and providing it to the accountant in a timely manner. And if you're a locum, you'd have a similar set of expenses to what we've got on these two pages here, but at the top of the page there would be your locum fees, then setting off against that. So their expenses. What do you need to know about paying tax? So first of all, taxation. Income tax, there are self-employed and employed individuals and both. Most of our GP clients are both. We have partners who are also salaried GPs in other practices, or salaried GPs who do self-employed locum work. There's national insurance. That's effectively another tax. We're going to have a look at an example of a tax calculation, and more importantly, we're going to have a look at timing of tax liabilities. So just looking at the next page, if you're employed, as you will be at the moment as registrars, you're effectively on PAYE. So GP registrars, salaried GPs, if you move from GP registrar to salaried GP, you're effectively on the same tax system. Or if you're a locum in a permanent position, you should be on the payroll. So P60s apply. You should have had your P60 for the year to 5th of April 20 recently, showing your gross pay and tax deducted at source for any employment role, which for you will be the GP registrar income. But note, there may be further expenses to claim even at the moment for professional subscriptions, exam fees, and possibly motor expenses if they're not being reimbursed by your employer. Then, so that's the employed person. The self-employed individual is a partner in a GP practice or a locum in a temporary position. So that's moving around surgeries. If you're a partner in a GP practice, your income is calculated from what we call the tax computation. So that's the share of the practice profits, less the personal expenses that were about £12,000 in the example we looked at, less capital allowances that were £800 in that example. So taking those three figures together gives you your taxable income that then goes on from the partnership tax return, which is signed by the partner responsible. It goes across to your personal tax return as the calculation for your tax payable. If you're a self-employed locum, the profits per your locum statement, which is the fees less the expenses, go onto your personal tax return. One or 2 points about the tax system. So we're looking here at the year to 5th of April 20, the tax year that's just finished. So the tax year is to the 5th of April. Any balance of tax due for the year to 5th of April 20 is payable by 31st of January 2021. There are strict deadlines for the completion of tax returns. They have to be submitted to HMRC by the 31st of January following the tax year end. So for the year to 5th of April 20, the deadline is 31st of January 21. If you do start self-employment, you need to register by the 5th of October following the end of the tax year. So if anybody starts working this year, which the ST3s will, you need to register by the 5th of October 21. So for the previous year, 1920, the deadline is next 5th of October. Just one point on the second figures here, the second comment about submission of returns. If you submit your personal tax return on paper, the deadline is 31st of October 20. It's online returns that have to be in by the 31st of January. when you register for self-employment, which is a role that the accountant usually takes on, HMRC issue you with a unique tax reference, which is a 10-digit number and will remain with you forever. So just try and pick up the questions. Erica, I claimed for exam fees £1,300 this year and got a tax rebate. However, due to COVID, the exam has been changed and fee has been reduced to £1,000. So you do need to notify HMRC of the change in circumstances, Erica. HMRC doesn't know we've been refunded, so we could keep it low. This is a par, because we still have receipt that shows £1,385 paid for the exam. You still should notify HMRC that your real cost is £1,000, even though Erica's agreeing with you. Yeah, you do have to be careful on this. It's not that the accountants want you to pay more, that eventually HMRC will get to the real cost, and it can create problems on interest and penalties if you've claimed the wrong figure, or albeit due to the circumstances. I hope that clears it up, Erica. So, Par, I think you probably need half an hour with the accountant just to tell you the rules in the background. Personal allowances then. We're all entitled to 12,500 of income without paying any tax. These are the figures for the year to April 20, up to net income of £100,000, and the 100,000 is a key figure. Agree, Par? I don't know if everybody can see your comments, but yes. Anybody earning 100,000 or more starts to lose the benefit of that £12,500. For every £2 you earn more than 100,000, you lose £1 of the 12.5. So by the time you get to 125,000 of income, you've lost that personal allowance of 12,500. So there's a penal rate between 100 and 125,000 that's an effective tax rate of 60%, because you're paying 40% tax plus the loss of the personal allowance effectively takes it to 60%. So as a salaried GP, this is easy to manage. If you decide that lifestyle above income, you'll stop at 100,000, you can do that when you negotiate in your sessions. As a self-employed locum, you can take time off work. But as a partner in a practice, it's not flexible, because one, you won't know your income until you get the accounts, and you can hardly say to the rest of the partners, I'm off now for a month or so because I've hit the 100,000, I'll see you in April. So it is very much dependent on what role you're playing, I should say. So the tax bands for all of us are 20, 40 and 45%. So anything over the 12,500 for the next 37,500 of income is taxed at 20%. Anything over that up to 150 is taxed at 40. And any excess, if you're fortunate enough to be over 150,000, a number of our GP partners are, you pay at 45%. These bands apply, you don't lose the lower band because you go into the 40% band, unlike your pension system, so you still keep the 20% band, even though you might have gone up to over 37,500, which most of you certainly will do. As far as paying the tax is concerned, there's only one tax bill. So if you've got your income as a GP, whether it's PAYE or self-employed, you could have rental income from a student flat that you used to own. Everything goes into one tax bill. You don't get different tax bills for different sources of income. As well as income tax, then there's another tax called national insurance, and you will be paying at the moment Class 1 NIC. So this is paid on employment income as you are at the moment. So if you look at your monthly pay slip, there will be national insurance deducted, and that's Class 1. If you become self-employed, you then pay Class 2 national insurance. So this is a locum or a partner, and you pay that at the rate of £3 per week, so £156 a year at the moment. And that cost falls into your tax bill in January, and eventually you get onto 6 monthly payments and pay in July. So you don't get a separate bill for that either. And then Class 4 national insurance is also payable by the self-employed person. This is more serious in terms of cost. So any profits or locum fees, less your expenses over 8,632 and up to 50,000 of income, you pay at 9% on that income. There's no upper limit. So any income over 50,000, you pay at 2%. And again, this liability drops into your tax bill in January and July each year. So it's up to the accountant to lead this on estimates, but these are significant costs. Whether you're employed or self-employed, whichever rates you're paying, overall you pay very similar figures. Whether you're paying class 1, class 2, or class 4, there's upper limits to the figures, and you pay roughly the same whichever role you go down. So that's income tax and national insurance. And then the other 2 points that you need to watch out for here are student loans. So the way the student loan repayments are made is by adding to your tax bill in January each year. So this is not tax, but this is the way the student loan's collected. So depending which plan you're on, if you're on plan 1, you pay 9% of your income over 18,900 as a student loan repayment. If you're on plan 2, you pay 9% over 25,700. If you've got a postgraduate plan, you pay any income over 21,000 at 6%. I'll just break to answer a question. Jigger, so if you earn over 100 to 120 to avoid more tax, it's better to earn less than 100 or more than 150. From a pro rata point of view, if you earn less than 100, you pay pro rata less tax, but you never pay back more than what you're earning. 125 is the cutoff, because once you earn at 125 and over, you've lost the personal allowance, so you're not losing any more tax in terms of penal rates at that point. So 100,000 is the key figure, but all it means effectively between 100 and 125,000, you earn less per hour. You're never going to pay more back in tax than what you're earning. Hope that's clear, Jigger. If it's not, just put another comment on, please. So the student loan to repay is part of your tax bill, but there's also child benefit. So anybody with income over 50,000 starts to repay the child benefit through the tax system in January. If your income is over 60,000, all the benefit is repaid. And for 2 children, that's usually around £1,800 a year. So there's nothing to stop you claiming the child benefit. You're doing nothing wrong by claiming it, but you need to budget for paying it back if the highest earner in the household is over 60,000. Shazad's asked, is there any benefit to pay your student loan back earlier? There is near the end of the term of the loan, because what happens is it's a set calculation on the tax return to make a payment. So if you're getting towards the end of the repayment, say you've got 5,000 left, and on your tax return the figure's calculated at 7, you'll still pay 7 and get a repayment a year or 18 months later. So when you're getting towards the end of the loan, you're actually better repaying it direct, and in my example, pay the 5 to stop you overpaying. So you do have to monitor the student loan. So that's income tax, national insurance, student loan, and child benefit are all part of the tax bill. What we're going to look at now is an example of Dr. X and circumstances that differ over 2 years. So this individual had some employment income, 30,000 in the year to April 20, and is a partner in that year. So he'll have started as a partner. Employment income might have been final year as a registrar, got into partnership, in that period earned 53,000. So total income in the year to 5th of April 20, 83,658, which is those 2 figures above. And then there are deductions to take off that, because he or she's under 100,000, get the full 12,500 allowance, paid pension contributions of 9,300, taken out a loan to buy into the partnership, and the loan interest is tax relievable, £1,500. So the total of those 3 figures there is 23,390. That figure is deducted from the figure above, 83, leaving taxable income of 60,268 for the year to April 20. And then the way the tax is paid, so again, this is the year to April 20, that's the 60,000 we've just spoken about. The first 37.5 is paid at 20%, which is £7,500 of tax cost. And the balance, 22,768, which is the balance up to 60,000, is taxed at 40%, and that's a tax cost of 9,107. So on 60,000 of taxable income, the total income tax bill is 16,607. Then, because this individual's self-employed, got the national insurance to pay class 2, £3 per week, Class 4, which is the national insurance payable on the partnership profits, 3766. So that figure is usually on average around £45,000 a year. Unfortunately for this GP, they've got a student loan plan too. On this level of income, the repayment cost would be 4369. So the average figure we see for GPs on average income is around 9,000 a year in student loan repayments, where they're purely self-employed. Claim child benefit for 2 children, income over 60,000, that's all repayable, that's 1,789. So all those figures are costs, and then because there was employment income in the year, PAYE has been paid, so the figure in brackets is the credit for PAYE, 4958. So if you take the figures down from 16,607, adding on down to the 1,700, less the 4958, it leaves a total tax cost for the year 1920 of 21,729. Please keep asking questions if you've got any. So that's the year to 5th of April 20, and then so that's a mixed year of registrar and partnership. It could be self-employment locum fees, by the way, the partnership figure, it doesn't make any difference to the conclusion. And then in the next year, in the individual's first full year in partnership, income for the full year is 128,000, which is about the average figure, by the way, that we see. Done some out of hours or other locum fees, 6,200. So total income in the year to April 21, 135,000. I'll come back to the personal allowance. Paid pension contributions as a part, you pay employer and employee contributions, 22,500. Paid loan interest on the loan he took out in the previous year, 3,629. Because the 135 less the 22 less the 3 is over £100,000, around 110,000. The full personal allowance is no longer available, so the 12,500, because of the level of income, is reduced down to 8,068. So you take the 8,068 plus the 22 plus the 3,6, they add up to 34,203. So the taxable figure is the 135 less the 34, leaving taxable income of 100,797. And then we go through the same process at looking what tax is payable on that 100,000. So again, the first 37,500 is at 20%, 7,500 tax cost. And the balance, the difference between 100,000 and the 37 is 63,297. That's payable at 40%. And that's a tax cost of 25,319. So total income tax on this level of income, 32,819. National insurance for this year is 159. Class 4 NI has gone up because there's more partnership profits, 5,272. Full year of student loan repayment, 9,836. Still claiming the child benefit on two children, so that gets into the calculation as repayable. So the line of figures starting from the 32 down to the 1,700 add up to 49,875, because there's no PAYE credit this year because this GP has not been employed during this year. So the total tax, national insurance, student loan and child benefit costs of 49,875 on 100,000 of income. And then the key point is, when is all this payable? So we're looking here at Dr. A's position. So if you remember for 1920, if I just go back a couple of screens, 1920, the total bill was 21,729, which is a mix of loan and tax. And that 21,729 appears there. So that's all payable 31st of January 21. So as for the ST3s are on now, you'll effectively start a year later. So your tax payable will be 31st of January 22. So for anybody starting in this year as self-employed, you just need to move the dates on a year to work out when your liabilities hit the system. So for this doctor, it got 17,300 of tax and national insurance plus 4,369 of student loan. So 21,729. But the way the system works, when you have a liability for 1 year, in January you pay half as much again on account for the following year. That 862 is the half figure, excluding the loan and child benefit, which don't come into the calculation for the payment on account. So the key figure here is there's 21,700 plus 8,600. This individual's got to be budgeting for 33,331 payable 31st of January 21. And once you're on the system to pay in January, you also pay in July. So the 31st of July 21 payment, 8602, is exactly the same figure as that one above, the second instalment, and that's payable 31st of July 21. So at that point, the individual's made two payments on account for the 2021 tax year. Just to bear in mind, under the COVID rules, the July 21, if anybody is paying tax at the moment, the July 21 liabilities now don't have to be paid until 31st of January 22. That's a one-off, or at least we hope it's a one-off as far as COVID's concerned. Then if you recall, the tax liability for the following tax year had gone up. So for 1920 it was 21,000, but for 2021 it had gone up in total to 49,000, and then that effectively gets caught in January 22. So already paid two lots of 8,000 for 2021 on account, but the final liability is nearer 49, including student loan. So there's a balance of tax to pay of 22, which is that, and there's the student loan to pay of 9,836. So in January 22 for the balance, there's 32,000 there. So if the 49 is effectively that 32 plus the 8 plus the 8, that's where the 49 has been paid. So that leads to another catch up in January 22, because if your payments on account go up for 1 year, you've then got the half instalment for the following year based on the previous year's tax liability. So that 19,940 is purely based on half of those three figures there. So where you have a balance in payment, it increases your payment on account. So for this GP, there are total taxed student loan and I payments in January 22 of 52,000. And it's so critical that you get an estimate from the accountant at the earliest point once you become self-employed, because we've got GPs who have been in the system years and still find this difficult to estimate. The key point here is that you've got 30,000 to pay in January 21. Cynthia can't hear me. Can others hear me? Could somebody just confirm that you can still hear me? Yeah, I think so. Just while I'm breaking off there, apart on PAYE contract, do student loan contributions occur from gross salary or after the tax has been paid? So it's effectively deducted from your, it's worked on your gross salary, but deducted off your net pay. So to be a gross salary less pension contributions that your student loans calculated on. So in going back to the screen, in January 21, this GP's got 30,000 to pay. July 21, 8,600. January 22, 52,611. And then this continues on. In July 22, there's 19,940 to pay as the second instalment for 21-22. That's exactly the same as that figure there that was paid in January. So if income then becomes even, there won't be the catch-ups, and the half-yearly instalment will be around 20,000 plus whatever the student loan repayment is. So the catch-ups, these increasing figures, tend to come in the first 2 Januaries that you pay the tax. But an accountant should be giving you an estimate at the earliest point as soon as you start self-employed work. Certainly any new partners we take on, we do a report even before they join the partnership, just to give them estimates of the tax liabilities. So that's the tax system. Other points then. Self-employed income against GP locum. You can't quite see the heading there, but there's a heading at the top. So now we're looking at the position. Do you go self-employed as a locum or a limited company? So if you're in a limited company, you can't pension your income if that's important to you, which it often is in the early years of your career. There are increased admin, accountancy costs and reporting obligations through a limited company. Most GPs look to incorporate to become more tax efficient, that can work in limited examples. We're dealing with over 400 locums. We've probably got 10 to 20 limited companies. It generally works well where you have a partner who is a lower rate taxpayer and you share the company with that partner, but it is also the partner's money when you share that. A company can actually end up costing more tax, and it does depend. So we say to every locum, have a discussion with the accountant before you go down this route. We pick up locums who have gone into limited companies with an accountant in the background, not having had the full conversation, and it's expensive then to get out of the limited company, or just cost neutral for running the company and incurring your costs that you don't need to take. We'd always say at the outset, go self-employed if you're not sure till you've had the conversation, because you can switch to limited company immediately if you want to. So we've got a couple of examples here, which I'm not going to go into all the figures because it's up to the accountant to do the figures. What we're trying to show here, for a locum who earns 60,000 self-employed, after tax of 15, you're left with income available 44,496. If you put that same money through a limited company, you pay corporation tax out of the company, leaving you with 48,000 available. You've then got your own tax to pay of 2,500 on drawing money from the company. So you've got net income of 46,000. So it's fairly marginal, a £1,600 difference between self-employed and company, bearing in mind there are more costs in the company, admin costs. So we'd say on those figures it wouldn't be worth going through the limited company. But every situation is different and needs looking at individually. We've just got one more example where it shows you when it, even on high income, 250,000. I've got to say, we haven't got many locums earning 250. I think one I can think of. After tax, self-employed, pays tax of 105, leaves 144,000 cash available. If you put that money through the limited company, 250,000, pay corporation tax from the company of 47.5, pay personal tax of those three figures there at different rates, leaves income after tax 143,000. So again, a 1,400 differential there between self-employed and company, and it's still not sufficient to drive you down the limited company route. So just going back to the other one, you actually finished it with a similar conclusion, but it does depend on the figures who's sharing the company. Shazad's asked, NHS pensions, financial pros and cons, practical considerations. I could probably sit here for 3 hours to answer that fully. Just to briefly sum up, our pension advisors, because I'm the accountant, not the financial advisor, we have pension advisors behind us, tell us it's the best scheme they see for returns because of the type of scheme it is. The issue with the NHS pension scheme, it's becoming very tax costly because there's tax on pension growth, and that's where the accountant and pension advisors come in. But certainly in terms of returns, even with the tax costs that are coming in, the pension advisors are saying that you wouldn't see the same return in any other pension scheme that they come across. So the cons are the tax costs, the pros are a good investment and good returns. Whether it stays that way after COVID, we'll have to see. So the points now just to consider when you're going self-employed or locum, does all the profit need to be extracted? More tax efficient if you've got a limited company to leave the money in the company, and you possibly could get the money out at the end on a 10% tax rate, and that would need accountancy advice, capital gains tax rates. As I mentioned earlier, if you can share the company with a spouse or partner who's a lower rate or nil taxpayer, then it is very tax efficient. Need to watch all the time when you're doing locum work whether something called IR35 applies. That's where you should be on the payroll of the practice you're working for. This is the practice's issue and not yours, but if you've set a limited company up and then IR35 applies, you'll have incurred costs that become wasted money because you'll be effectively on the payroll. So finally, top tax tips for efficiency. Always ensure you claim all the expenses. That's accountant led, and we give checklists to our locum GPs to consider every possible heading. As I mentioned earlier, when I think somebody was saying tongue-in-cheek to leave the expenses claim as it was on the exam fees, just be aware of HMRC penalties, because the penalty can be 100% of the tax underpaid. The accountant's always going to say keep records up to date. But bear in mind that there are other things like gift aid donations that you can claim on your tax return. Again, the accountant should be prompting that, but when they're open, when you visit National Trust places, etc., they'll often ask, do you want to gift aid the entrance fee? And it's tax beneficial for you to do that and for the charity. We'd always say respond to the accountant's request for information as prompt as you can. You get better service that way. We get 75% of our information in after Christmas with a January deadline, and things just get done in order of receipt, as opposed to this time of year where we can almost guarantee things get turned around immediately. Ask for a tax estimate and be aware of tax payments date. It's probably the most important message from this talk. I've got to say, if you're having to ask your accountant for a tax estimate, you're probably with the wrong accountant, because they should be telling you you need one and they'll do it. Be aware of the 100 to 125% income bracket. If you can control that and it matters to you, lifestyle against income, you're better keeping it below £100,000. We're always going to say take expert advice. It's not just accountants and finance. It's having the right solicitor who understands if you're going into a partnership, professional valuers and banks. If you're looking at banks and buying into a practice, at the moment, the main two healthcare players are Lloyds Bank and NatWest, because they have healthcare managers. So you need to ask for the healthcare manager rather than the local manager. And of course, Serena operates My Local Manager, and that's a wonderful place to record all of the above and also organise your day with calendars, etc. And we'll always recommend you to speak to BHP Chartered Accountants. My contact email address is on the next slide. If anybody wants to speak to me, please do. I'm happy to ask any questions, whether you're with us or not, as clients in the future. You can't see that I'm also on Twitter, so we tweet out quite regularly healthcare information. So if you just look at Colin Hoare, you'll find me. And on LinkedIn, I've got about 12,000 followers, so that's a good story, especially with being a sports fan. People like Marcus Truscothick, Matthew Hoggard, and other sports people, but mainly healthcare people, and we get messages out on LinkedIn as to what's happening in the healthcare industry. And with that, if there are no other questions, please ask if there are. I'll hand back to Serena.
Thanks, Colin. Well, I hope that was useful for everybody. You've got to shoot off now, don't you, Colin? You're doing another... Oh, hello?
Another seminar. Yeah, another one. So if anybody has got any questions that they think of, would they manage feeding them via you and you send them on to me?
Yes, of course. So post any questions, because I'm going to cover something about pensions and expenses and stuff as well. So if there's any other questions, you know, I can put them on your behalf to Colin afterwards. But thanks so much, Colin. I'll let you go.
Great, thanks, Serena. Bye, everybody.
Bye. So, hello, everyone. I'm going to try and clear this whiteboard. So I hope that was useful, and it's kind of helped you get started kind of with a fresh perspective about all the financial things you need to think about kind of during a GP training and after. So I'm now going to talk about some real practical tips for those of you that are finishing, or those of you that are going to be starting in general practice. Maybe you're an ST2 and you're moving into like your last year as a GP. Maybe you're an ST1, you're going to have a few months of GP training at some point in the next year. Hopefully the following slides are going to be really useful for you. And like Colin's talk, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So do post any questions. You can send them privately to me, or you can post them for the thread. But I really want you to leave here knowing kind of that you feel a bit more confident. So a bit about me. So I finished my GP training almost 5 years ago now. So I'm a first 5 GP, and I'm not too far along from you guys. I remember kind of finishing training very well and what it felt like. During my last year of training, so as an ST3, I had a year out for maternity and I had my daughter at that time. And then I kind of came back and I was really thinking about what kind of career I wanted as a GP and what I wanted to do. And I knew I didn't want to do kind of full-time clinical. You know, I had my child and I wanted to make sure that I had a flexible role and I got to do different things. But during my year of maternity, I also found I had a lot of other interests as well. So I was interested in education, lots of different things. So I kind of wanted to take that forward into my GP career, and I wanted to feel very happy about kind of the way I worked, especially because I had to leave my child in childcare to go to work, and I wanted to make sure that I felt rewarded and that I felt like I was actually doing something worthwhile when I finished training. So fast forward a few years on, and I think this is my CV really. So kind of I finished training and I started working as a locum GP. I worked actually directly for a few practices. I still work for them now. I found all the stuff that Colin's talked to you about, the financial side, kind of keeping a diary of all my sessions, sorting out my pension forms, sorting out my tax, being really clever with my mileage expenses, was very, very difficult to do manually. So I set up a software which has since partnered with the RCGP Plus called My Locum Manager, which is a really good financial and workforce software for GPs that want to do some locum work or for portfolio work. So a lot of our GPs are GPs that might either locum full-time, but they work directly for practices, or they are partners or salary GPs, and they do additional portfolio works. They might do locum work, they might work in out of hours, they might do CCG work, but essentially it's work where they have to invoice and pension, and so they use the platform for that. I don't know if you guys know of Redwell GP Update, but I'm a presenter for them, and that came about because after I set up My Locum Manager, it really took off, and we had like so many kind of GPs joining up every kind of week. And then I started to think, well, when I was a GP trainee, I had these teaching sessions like I'm doing for you now. And I don't know if I really appreciated those sessions kind of at the time. But when I left BTS, I really felt like, you know, it'd be really good to have access to that kind of teaching and have access to that kind of support. So I started conversations with Redwell, and they give a lot of our members a lot of free content and discounts to help them keep up to date. And I also, because of my educational background, which I'll talk about, came on as a GP Update presenter. So I get to go across the country. I present on their update course. They've got a number of different courses, but I present on the update one. And it's really enjoyable. You know, get to meet lots of GPs. They've now done a lot of online learning, but it's a lot of fun and great for my own learning. I'm Macmillan GP for my area, which means that's not patient facing, that's looking at cancer strategy and improvements for cancer. I write for a magazine called Pulse, and the King's College London and Imperial College London are there because when I came to the end of my ST1 year, I emailed my local medical school and said I was interested in GP teaching. And so they then paid me to do a course, and then I was given medical students every year up until I finished my training, and I became an OSCE examiner during that time. So I'd say for those of you that are ST1s who are interested in education or doing something else, or maybe want a bit of a different income, that's a really good way of building up lots of experience, revising your exam stuff and supporting students. And at King's, one of the things I did was support medical resit students, so students that had failed the year at medical school, and kind of really help them to kind of get back on track and pass their exams going forward. Okay, so I mean, I'd probably say this screen really shows you I really have a true portfolio career. At the center of it is my clinical work, and then outside of that, I do lots and lots of different things. And I didn't think I'd say this, but I really love my job. And I'm really glad I love my job, because now I've got 2 children, and it's quite rewarding, like going to work and enjoying what I do, and then coming back and obviously having my mummy time. And I think my biggest job is probably being mum of those 2 little monkeys you can see in the screen there. Okay, so this slide really is for, I guess, for those that you are finishing, it's probably more paramount, but it kind of summarizes all the documents you need to be getting ready kind of for post CCT. So you need an up-to-date CV, you need your CCT and your GMC certificate and a performers list inclusion letter. And those 3 things happen when you're signed off your e-portfolio. And I understand, like with COVID and, you know, all the changes that have happened, it's quite an uncertain time. And I'm going to talk a bit about that shortly. But essentially, when you get signed off your e-portfolio, you those 3 things happen pretty much automatically. You get an email, you click on the link, you sign up, you pay your money, and then you're on the you get your GMC certificate, and all the other things happen. I wanted to say a bit about certificate of indemnity cover, because the rules in the last 2 years have changed. So you guys won't know any different, but in the 2 years before, anyone that was doing additional portfolio roles or locum work would have to pay their own indemnity. Practices often paid part of or all of the salary GP's indemnity, or it got included in the negotiation of the contract. So what's happened 2 years ago is the state-backed indemnity was introduced. So what that means is for any clinical error we make as doctors, it's covered. So a bit like when you work in hospital, if something happens, the trust represents you and you've got a medical indemnity provider that represents you. And now in general practice, the same thing happens. But there is a caveat. So what they won't cover is complaints about your professional conduct, so nothing to do with your clinical stuff. They won't cover any kind of GMC referrals or anything that's deemed as non-NHS work. And that could be, because when I first heard about it, I thought, okay, well, I don't do any non-NHS work. But that is things like kind of signing taxi medicals. It's the kind of doing private letters or social housing letters, or, you know, you get marathon runners that need a letter for you to say you said it's okay for them to run a marathon. All those kinds of things come under that remit. And so for that reason, anybody who is doing additional general practice will generally take out additional indemnity cover on top of the Crown indemnity, which actually is very cost effective. It's only a few £100s and it covers you for all those additional things. And I think if you're going to do out of hours or urgent care, or say purely locum or locum and salary, or you're going to be supervising physicians, associates in your practice, or anything else, then actually having that additional level of cover is important. The way you organise that is when you finish training, you call the 3 providers. So that's the MPS, the MDU, and the MDDUS, and you tell them what roles you're going to do, and you get a quote, and you find out what cover is included in that, and then you decide who you want and how much it is, and then who you're going to go for. So the next thing I'd say, so I hope that makes sense. Obviously, ask me any questions if you want me to clarify anything. I'm assuming you're all online for your DBS check. And if you're not, then you would apply to do it online. If your bank card changes or your address changes, you may need to reapply for that. The other thing is your immunisation record. So it's just a quick tip for you based on my own experience, which may or may not be useful for you. But a kind of a year post CCT, I had to have some blood tests done. I'm not sure why, but my Hep B antibody levels were low and I had to have another booster. And I'd been under the impression that because I'd had all the injections and boosters, I'd have lifelong immunity. But as I'd left and I was locuming, it was such a faff to sort out because I didn't have a set occupational health department. So I'd say if it's been a very long time since you've had any of your IMS checked and your antibodies level checked, just get them checked before you finish, because you're under the trust at the moment and under OccuHealth. And you won't all need to do this, but some of you might be useful. So for references, I got 2 letters of good standing from my PD and my educational supervisor, which just said that I was on the scheme and they were very happy to support a full clinical reference if it was needed. And that was really useful for the portfolio roles I went for, because it meant I was kind of first through the door with a job offer whilst everybody else was still waiting to hear back from referees and get all their paperwork in order. So I definitely recommend something like that for you guys going forward. Okay, so the next couple of slides are based on COVID and what's happened in primary care, because that's going to affect you guys kind of going forwards and the ways in which you work. I'd be really interested to hear if you can just put in the chat box, do you have any specific concerns about, you know, what's happened with COVID and what's going to happen with you? It might be, so I've been doing a lot of these, like sometimes 2 a day with Colin. Me and Colin have seen each other really a lot over the last few months, but a few common concerns that have come up from trainees is a lot of people are worried about work. They're worried, are people recruiting? Are there going to be jobs available for us? Some of you have been nervous about the change to virtual consulting and kind of going forward, what that means. So you can private message this if you don't want to share, but I'd be really interested to know, like, are you, like, for those of you that are kind of finishing soon, do you have work available? Are you worried about anything with regards to work and COVID? Because I can cover those as we go along. Okay, so while I'm waiting for you guys to respond there, I just want to talk through this slide, which is a bit about virtual consulting and COVID. So now in general practice, we're doing mostly kind of telephone triage or video consulting and then a few face-to-face sessions. This is a very new skill, and what as GPs, we have the experience, or GP trainees, we have the knowledge, but we don't have the experience of virtual consulting. And it's a very different way of consulting. And from my experience, the last few months has been trying to make decisions on a sick child over the phone and thinking, do they need to go in, or what's the focus of infection? So I had a lot of children, kind of mums calling up, their children have temperatures. And what I've started to do when I'm doing a video consultation is ask the mum to put the hand on the chest and watch the breathing, or put the so put the hand on the chest and watch the breathing go up and down, or ask the mum to look in the back of the child's mouth to see if there's any white patches or any signs of tonsillitis. And I've picked out probably 9 cases of tonsillitis just by doing that. I put on here resources. Now, lots of places, RCGP, Redwell, EGP Learning are doing lots of free teaching and resources for everybody, all of us, whether we're a partner, salary GP, new GP, whatever, to get up to speed with virtual consulting. So whilst it's all free and readily available, I definitely recommend you guys over the next few weeks getting well rehearsed in it, because I think for the ST2s, that's going to be the norm when you go into your registrar year. And for the ST3s going into general practice, again, it's going to become part and parcel of the way that we're going to be working. Okay, so this slide is basically about the equipment you're going to need going forward. So every year I do, with my local manager, I do a webinar every month for our members, and every year I organise one with one of the medico-legal advisors from the indemnity companies. This year it was with the MDDUS, and Alan, who's the risk advisor there, was talking about working safely and ways in which we can work safely. And there was a few key learning points which I've put on the next few slides, which he shared. So one comes down to the equipment that we carry. So on here, you can carry a lot more than this. It's not an exhaustive list, but the key points I wanted to highlight is things like the pulse oximeter. So because the NICE sepsis guidance changed in the last 2 years, now, when we're assessing a sick adult or sick child, we've got to document their vitals and make a decision on whether or not we think it's sepsis, and then make the appropriate management plan. So with a child, don't use an adult pulse oximeter on a child. Invest in a pediatric one because they're more accurate. And if you're assessing sick children or pyrexia children, you need to document things like their pulse and their stats. At the bottom, it says PT kits. That's pregnancy test kits. So if you're carrying them around in your home visiting bag, just make sure you check the date, because often it will be a long time until you use them. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is what we discussed in this medico-legal webinar, was about a couple of cases that Alan had discussed where the GP had assessed some patients who actually seemed to, from the assessment, seemed to be okay, but actually were very unwell. And what had then transpired is the equipment that the GP was using had not been calibrated in a very long time. Therefore, the readings it was giving was inaccurate. Now, if I was going to ask you guys, how often do you think your equipment needs to be calibrated? So in the box, just put if you think it's annually, monthly, 5 yearly. I just want you all to put a number down. So I'll wait while you do that. I've got some private questions come through. I'll deal with those in a few seconds while you guys all just post your thing. So the question is, how often do you think your equipment needs to be calibrated in order for you to be working safely? So I've had yeah, great, everyone's oh, you're all so shy. I've had lots of private messages. Okay, so most people are saying yearly, someone's saying every 2 years, someone's saying 6 monthly. So the answer is actually, it varies on the equipment, and this is where we kind of fall short or get caught out as GPs. So when you order your equipment, which, as Colin told you, you can claim kind of your expenses on, etc. In certain situations, when you get that new equipment, it comes with a manufacturer's guidance, and on that manufacturer's guidance for each equipment, it will have their guidance on how often you need to calibrate it. So before you put it in the bin, what I do is I tape on the back of my thermometer, etc., yearly or 3 yearly or whatever, and then I ask my practice managers when the equipment's going to be calibrated. I make sure I go in with it and I get it calibrated on the same day. So the answer is it differs. It really depends on the type of equipment and how often you're going to need to calibrate it, and I have a date on the back of it when it's next due for calibration. And again, it's really important, those things, because you can never predict when you're going to see a sick patient. Your equipment's going to give you a wrong reading, and you might make a different decision to what you would have had it shown you an accurate reading. And also, if you're not sure, if the patient clearly looks unwell but your readings are kind of not really matching that, just get another piece of equipment and check. So I had a question about the new ways of consulting. So the question was, like, with telephone triage and the review of clinically urgent, or okay, so the questions were, you know, with this new way of consulting, how do we think it's going to go going forward? Do you think we're going to go back to face-to-face? Well, I'm going to share the results of a practice survey we did on a webinar last month, which is going to answer that question. I think it's an excellent question because it means we need to know how we need to prepare going forward. So I'd now like to ask you guys, how many of you carry drugs around? Medical, guys, medical drugs. Don't need to know about the other stuff. And if you do carry them, what do you carry? So do you carry benzoyl penicillin? Do you carry adrenaline? What do you carry? So I don't carry any of my own medical drugs because the surgeries where I work, I know where the emergency drugs are, and that's just the systems that I've used. But the medical legal webinar we did, it covered actually that more than 50% of clinical errors that we make as new GPs when we first qualify actually relate to prescribing and medication errors. And I wanted to share two scenarios with you which happened to me, which kind of really help highlight going forward kind of maybe, you know, kind of things to be aware of. So the first thing is that I had a few months into post CCT, I had a case of I think it was an 18-month-old girl brought in over after the bank holiday weekend who clearly looked unwell. And as I was assessing her, I knew I was going to refer her in, but I couldn't, for the referral letter, I couldn't work out what the focus of infection was. So I was thinking, it's not a chest infection, her chest is clear, I don't know what it is. So I asked the mum, can I have another look in her ear? Because I thought, am I missing like a otitis media? Where is this infection coming from? Her urine was clear. And as I moved her hair out the way, she had a purpuric rash in her hairline. So all of a sudden, I'm going from managing this child who's got a temperature, needs to be seen by peds because she's not that unwell, to managing meningitis. And I went to mix up the Ben Pen. And I was like, what do I mix it up with? Is it saline or is it water for injection? So if I was going to ask you guys, just put your answer in. Do you think you mix it with water for injection or saline for injection when you're administering Ben Pen? I'm not going to ask you about the dose because obviously that's a bit of a tricky one, but just pop it in the chat box what you think you need to mix. You can send it privately if you're shy, but the main thing is I just want to kind of get a feel of what you think might be required in that kind of emergency situation. Okay, some people are water, some people, Erica's like, not a clue, water. Some people like saline, water, saline. Okay. So the answer is water for injection. And I think somewhere deep down in my mind, I did know that. But at the time, I've got this sick child, I'm overrunning, I'm now managing meningitis, which I've laughed managing a scenario in my CSA, like not in real life. And, you know, it was really stressful. So Elliot saying would have to find out. So off the back of that, actually, I created a guide, which I'll show you a picture of later, but I'm going to share it with you guys, which carries all the emergency drugs you need as a GP or a new GP. So it's got all the emergency drugs, how you mix them up, the doses, what to give if the patient is allergic to first line, and it's got a summary of the sepsis guidance. So normally when I come and do this talk, I hand it out, but right now we've got a digital version which is kind of created with Redwell. So I'm going to send a link out to you guys after the webinar and you can just download it and keep it safe. But it's just, I mean, I still use it pretty much every day in clinical practice now, and it answers those questions. But what it did make me think was, do you know what, if I'd been carrying Ben Pen in a home visiting bag, would I have remembered to pack the saline? I don't think I would have. And there was another case I had, which is just a really quick one. It was a asthmatic child who I needed to give nebs to. And it'd been ages since I'd put like a nebulizer together, but I did it. And I was just thinking something's not right. The noise is coming out, but there's not that much steam, like what's going on? And I had this rule post CCT, like if I wasn't sure about something, I'd just ask someone, no matter how stupid I seemed. So I did, I asked the nurse who does this day in, day out, and she came and she spotted it straight away. And it's this, I always forget what it's like, this triangular pivot thing that sits in that little bottle that you squirt all the salbutamol in, and that was missing. It was a manufacturing error, and I would never have picked that up. And she was like, "Oh, that's weird. This should be here, and it's not." Then she just grabbed another pack, and we set it up. And since then, every year, I go into the practice as part of my appraisal. I sit down with the nurse, usually over a cup of tea and some biscuits, and she's like, okay, let's go through putting up a nebulizer. Let's go through putting these emergency drugs together and administering them. And we just go through kind of common emergencies, because nurses day in, day out will do things like injections and, you know, kind of nebulizers. We don't tend to do it that often. So it's just really good having that refresher. And then I just import that into my appraisal. But it's really good kind of going forward. Okay, so finding the right job. So some of you had posted that you were thinking of kind of, you know, maybe salaried, partner, or some were going to do locum, some were going to do a mixture of salaried and locum. So this question is, I'm just going to publish a poll here for you guys to answer. So if you just fill in, even if you're ST1 and it's a little way away, it'd be really good to know where you're thinking of in terms of kind of going forward. Now, while you're doing that, I think these are common questions that from the VTS talks that I do comes up, and actually was in my mind as well. So where do I start after years of being told which rotation I'm going to do, where I'm going to travel, what my kind of specialities I'm going to do? I'm going to get to choose. Now I have to decide what I'm going to do all by myself. A lot of people worry about finding the right practice or practices. Many of us want some continuity. So even with, say, locum work, a lot of us just want to have those regular practices where we can go to. Some people, though, just want lots of variety, which is great. A common thing is everybody kind of wants support, though, kind of, you know, when you finish VTS, everybody wants that thread of support to take them through. And a common question for salary GPs is, how do I know it's a fair contract? And I think, you know, really fair question. So just a quick one on this. I do a separate kind of contracts and negotiating webinar, which is coming up next month. I think it's going to go through the RCGP, but that's going to cover all of that, like rates and negotiating contract. But I just want to give you some kind of key things to think about here, which is, if you're looking at salaried contract, really it should be a BMA contract. If it's not a BMA contract, you want to know why. It might not be a bad thing. There might be additional bonuses in there which make it move away from the standard BMA contract, but you really want to know why it's different. Is it different because there's less annual leave? Is it different because I'm just reading out examples of actual changes that I've come across or been told about. So one was there was less annual leave. One was there was less study leave. One was there was a 3-month notice period from the salaried job, and the other was the setup of the salary GP having to go in for 7 a.m. meetings on a Thursday and do the late that same day, which meant they were working like a 12 or 14-hour day every Thursday, and that had been in the changes to the contract. So that was you know, the main thing to think about, is it a fair contract? Well, is it a BMA contract? Can someone review it for you from the BMA? Can you run it by your PDs or your educational supervisors, as long as they're not the people employing you? And if it's not the BMA contract, why not? Why is it different? Okay, someone's asking, did I worry about going on maternity leave again? How do I negotiate maternity leave for the future in a salaried or partner position? Yeah, that's a really good question. So I didn't worry about maternity leave. So I had already, so I finished training, I emailed a few local practices and went in, saw them and said, look, I've just, you know, I've just finished CCT. I'd like to work in the area. If you have any sessions, please let me know. And out of those, kind of all of them got back in touch, and I started to work for them on the days that I didn't have, that I had childcare, or, you know, some of them were really flexible and I'd do it in between like feed times or nap times and stuff, while my parents were like looking after my daughter. And then I actually at one of them got offered a salaried position, but then I was already expecting my son, so I kind of was very honest with them and said, well, look, you guys need continuity and I'm going to be going on maternity leave in a few months' time. And what I did over that time was I just did more sessions, and then when I then took my maternity leave, I got statutory maternity pay, and I'd already saved up extra from the work I'd been doing. And then I had 10 keep in touch days before I went back, where I obviously earned money while I did extra sessions, and it got me back in the swing of things. But because I had that direct relationship with those practices, and they knew, you know, I was going on maternity leave, and they knew when I'd roughly be back, and we kept in touch actually. Like I sent them photos when I had the baby and I took the baby in, who vomited all over reception's floor, but they didn't care. And they were like, go Serena, have a coffee, we'll play with the baby. So I had that relationship with them. I wasn't just somebody random that they just booked every now and again. I really became part of the team. And so 3 months before I was going to go back, I just emailed them again and said, look, I'm coming back to work, officially on this date. Please let me know if you've got any additional sessions for me. And I did. And that's how I kind of did it. So as a salaried GP or future partner position, so my husband is a GP partner. When he was a salary GP, his contract was a non-BMA contract. And actually they had put in there that he wasn't entitled to like additional paternity leave additional paternity leave or paternity pay, something like that. So he only had the standard amount of time off, and he wasn't paid for that then. And then, so that caused a few kind of financial stresses for us. But in terms of it affecting your future as a salary GP or partner, I don't think so. I think if you're going into a partnership, you need to know clearly what the expectations are for you when you're on maternity leave, what money you're going to be receiving out of the partnership, and when you're likely to go back. Because I have heard stories of some partners kind of being made to go back within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that. So I think you need to, because that's the way their business was structured, there wasn't enough people on the ground and things like that. So I don't think it's difficult at all in terms of negotiating maternity leave, because that should be in your contract as a standard. It's just if you want a bit more time or less time, how you would discuss that going forward. And that just means having a conversation, really. Okay, so I hope that's answered your question. So types of work, we talked about this. So I sit here in the portfolio role kind of area, and it sounds like, looking at the results of the poll, let's have a look at it. So most of you are going to do a mixture of locum and salaried. So you're going to sit here sessional. You're going to do part sessions as a salary GP, part as a locum GP. And there's a few people sitting here with regards to partnership, and then some of you sitting here. So great. So, good mix there. So this next couple of slides are based on what's happened with regards to COVID and recruitment and in general practice. I think it's really useful for you guys to know kind of going forward what to expect. So obviously now we've all gone digital. Over 98% of practices are undertaking video and digital consultations. God knows what the other 2% are doing, because they should all be doing this. But that means essentially patient demand, which has dramatically decreased, is being better managed. We're obviously on lockdown or coming out of lockdown, depending on what day it is and what Boris decides. And partners and salary GPs have cancelled their annual leave. So my husband hasn't had any annual leave in the last 4 or 5 months, because it's all been about COVID response. Now, as a result of this full staff capacity, dramatically reduced patient demand, there have been reports of reduced work opportunities. So we did a practice survey, and we surveyed a large group of kind of GPs as well. And it looked like the main groups affected fell into these 3 cohorts. So new GPs, people that have CCT'd kind of mid-COVID, so in the last 3 months, found that actually no one was really recruiting salary GPs or locum GPs, and they felt quite lost. They weren't really sure. They hadn't had time to build up relationships because they'd been an employee, then they finished and their contract finished. They weren't having any income come through. They were feeling quite lost, actually. The second group is kind of those people who were locuming, but they had direct relationships with their practices. So they had a group of practices where they were the go-to GP, and they noticed, there was maybe a slight reduction in demand of sessions, or some sessions were cancelled. On the whole, they knew, well, actually, when the practices got busier, they would be the first port of call. So they experienced more security in a way, knowing that, well, things are a bit unpredictable now. And just to give you my example, I had calls and WhatsApps from my practice manager saying, look, there's all this COVID stuff happening now, Serena, can you come in 20 minutes early? Because we need to get you logged on to AccuRx, we need to show you what we're doing, etc. So I was like, yep, sure, we'll do that. And that was it. But then there's a third group of GPs who, I'd say those that were locuming through agencies or through third parties, who didn't have any direct relationships and who had a lot of work cancelled, and who couldn't actually then directly approach those practices where they'd worked through the agency because of the terms and conditions of an agency, were really affected in terms of income and things like that as well. So I think those 3 main groups have been impacted in some way, some more than others, but because of COVID. And the results of the practice manager survey were actually quite detailed, but I've just summarized 6 points here for you guys, which I think might be useful in terms of kind of going forward. So practice managers acknowledge there had been a reduction in demand, but they said actually as we go forward, demand is actually increasing. And what is increasing, and those of you that are ST3s are probably noticing in practices, it's all the general GP stuff's coming back now, you know, anxiety, skin problems, joint problems. It's less about COVID and more about the day-to-day stuff that we were dealing with before. Now, someone asked about the future of consultation. So all practice managers who responded actually were adamant that the future consultations we will all be doing, no matter what role we take on, will be mixed. We're going to be doing telephone, video with face-to-face within each session. Now, they wanted that because it makes the practice run a lot smoother, demand is a lot better managed, and also patients like it now. So they're not going back to full face-to-face. They think this is going to be the model for the future. In terms of, there was some questions where GPs were worried, like, oh, when am I going to get locum work, etc. And actually all of them said, look, we always need a good local GP as a, you know, locum who can be booked directly. That's always going to be in demand. They did say that because of now with employers, they're going to have to show that they've looked after their staff have been inducted, that they've assessed the risk of that staff for picking up COVID, that actually they're going to want a more regular workforce, which I think makes sense. So it means, I think actually it looks like more and more is going to whichever, if it's salaried or locum or partner, it's better to have conversations directly with a practice and start becoming that go-to person. A lot of practice managers were very happy because it seems like GPs, especially those that maybe finished training, were getting proactive and actually emailing their local practices, just CCT'd, I'm looking for this kind of position, you know. And many of them said that actually, although they weren't advertising for salaried posts, they were definitely open to recruiting, and a lot of them were reviewing their workforce demands over the next year. They were saying things like, yeah, we've got planned maternity leaves and paternity leaves and things all like this in the pipeline. So actually we will recruit, although we're not advertising. Like, yes, if you're local and you've found us kind of online and you want to start discussions about that, definitely contact us and we'll be happy to engage. Okay, I've got a little video now that I did with one practice manager who was talking about kind of recruitment, so for any kind of position, but I'm just going to play it for you guys now. Just let me know if there's any sound issues in the chat box.
For me, I like the new GPs that make direct contact with practices.
Okay.
It shows the practice manager or the GP partner that this individual is in terms of keenness, is making that extra step, that extra effort to introduce themselves, tell them where they ideally like to live, their shift pattern, what suits them, and then it enables the practice manager to have a picture of whether that individual would suit the practice's requirements immediately.
Yeah.
I do like those CVs that come straight in and that they're more personalized as well. It shows that the individual has gone on the practice website, done their research, see who the practice manager is or the GP partners are, and said, dear Prash, I came across your website. I like the look of your practice, whatever, if they do. And you are local to where I reside, and I would be keen to offer you my expertise should you require it. If you don't mind, for example, just let me know if you need or what your requirements are. It's that kind of that personal approach I do like, as opposed to, say, an agency blanket emailing everybody.
Okay, great. So let's start the presentation again. Okay, cool. So I'd be really interested to know how many of you that are CCTing soon have already sorted out work. So again, you can private message me, but just say yes or no. Have you found a job, or are you looking for a job in your area? So the practice manager's feedbacks were, you know, how can you find a job in this current climate if it seems like work opportunities are reduced? And all of them said, just email us directly. You might also want to avoid competitions. You might want to, I don't think you need to go on an agency or anything, because they're so competitive now that you're not really going to get a look in. Start building a practice database, and when you're contacting practices, make sure you name drop. So you say which scheme you've qualified from, where you've been a registrar, and that you live locally. That's always really good. Okay, so for those of you interested in out of hours, I'd say just email the out of hours providers directly. I really love NHS Choices. It's a free website, and you put in there your postcode and it comes up with all the local practices to you, and then you can go on their website and start contacting them as well. Okay, so that's just a summary of, you know, kind of contacting practices directly through NHS Choices, you know, contacting your training practices. You might not want to roll at the practice you're training, but there's other training practices on your scheme where you might want to link into. So I think there's lots and lots of opportunities. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just getting some private messages through about work and things like that. Okay, which I'll read out shortly. So if you want to work locally and maybe you want to do some salaried work with some locum work on top, and you want a way of keeping that all the finances and everything tied in, as Colin was mentioning, you might find My Locum Manager really helpful. The way we're helping actually both practices and locums now is kind of a new feature which we've piloted in other areas, which is this. So you put on all your jobs, and it could be CCG work, it could be out of hours, it could be locum work, it could be whatever, any kind of income related work you just put on the system. That links with your phones, you know where you're working, but also local practices can contact you and then send you sessions without having to pay any agency fees and help build up a relationship. So I think proactive rather than reactive for any kind of role that you want. So once you start working, on your first day as a salary GP or locum GP or partner, you want to go in early, you want to get to know the staff, you want to get extension numbers for the staff, because when you're dealing with things that you're not familiar with, rather than running around the building, you want to just be able to call reception or the practice manager and say, look, I've had a query about this, can you give me some advice on where I signpost them? The other stuff is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. I've put in here about PPE. So I think if you're going to be kind of locuming at different places, you're just going to want to know that PPE is provided, so it's worth asking them. Okay, so this bit ties in with what Colin said, and we do this talk a lot together. And when you're working as self-employed, so that could be, you know, locum out of hours or whatever, you're going to need these basic things. You need to be able to have an up-to-date diary of all the sessions that you've got booked, and you want an audit trail for everywhere you've worked, who's paid you, who hasn't paid you. You want to be able to generate invoices and pension forms. You want to be able to document your mileage and have that done automatically. Log all your expenses and keep your receipts, and have that all collated together for someone like Colin. So you would download it and just send it to him, and then he's got a summary of all your earnings for the year. And that is essentially what My Locum Manager does for thousands of GPs. But the other additional benefits is something I really believe in, which is support. And I mean, just the support we give, or that I give, is like every GP on My Locum Manager gets a access to webinars every month. They get discounts for Redwell, so they make sure, you know, they're keeping up to date with their learning. That guide there is the one I was talking about with all the drugs and emergency. Oh, I've actually got it here. I managed to find it while the video was playing. So it's got all the kind of sepsis guidance and all the other bits just to help you work safely. We do accountant savings. We partnered with Headspace to help against burnout and give discounts on medical equipment if anyone's buying any new ones as well. And as I was mentioning, so we're looking to support practices further with building connections with local GPs so they can get regular cover and build up a relationship. And you might even want to become salaried there someday, who knows? So this here is, so these are sessions I've booked. This is an invitation from a local practice, and I click on it and I can see where they are, what the rate is, you know, and I can email them directly on there and just say, yep, I can do it, or sorry, I can confirm the session, or email them and say, well, I can do an hour later, or whatever, and just start that conversation as well. So I wanted to show you this slide because I hadn't seen this. I haven't seen pension forms until many, many months after I'd actually CCT'd and started work. And then I realized that I had to keep pensioning my self-employed income, and I hadn't realized how. And the way in which you do it is these forms need to be kind of completed, and there's a Form A that goes with every invoice, there's a Form B you fill in every month, and then you upload those two onto Capita, so PCSE, and then you make a bank transfer to NHS England. Solo forms are for out of hours. So all you need to know really looking at these forms are, right, how do I pension? I need to complete these forms, and then I need to make a payment into NHS England. How do I know how much to pay? Well, it will be all if you're using My Locum Manager, it will calculate everything for you. Otherwise, you need to manually calculate it. oh, and that's just a screenshot how you just create all your invoices, and then the forms are done for you on MLM, so it's really easy. I know some of you kind of from your private questions want more details about that, but what I'll say is, because I want to cover enough stuff for you guys, but what I'd say is there's a free guide that I've written which covers how to pension in 3 easy steps, what you need to know about kind of setting your tiered rate, where the forms go, how you know how much to pay, and I'll send you a link for that so you can download it if that's useful for you guys. Now, you can't claim pension, which is what Colin was talking about. So if you work as a limited company, so you need to think really about and speak to a good accountant about whether or not you want to set up as a limited company. You can't claim your pension for work done over 10 weeks ago. So you need a way of just creating these forms, sending them off, making the payment, which is what I basically do. I just literally, it takes me 5 seconds at the end of the month, just send my invoices. When I've got paid, I just create the form, press the button and transfer the money across. So it literally takes me a few minutes. And expenses. So I've created an expense checklist of all the expenses you can claim kind of going forward. They're the 2 guides that I talked about. Cool. So I've put Colin's email on there because I know he's gone now, but he's doing another BTS talk. But if you've got any additional questions, just post them now. But what I'd like to know is, has that been useful in terms of the stuff we've covered for you guys? Do you feel a bit more prepared kind of going forward? Okay, good. Yeah. So sorry, these are all private questions. So I don't know if you guys can see it. Someone saying, because it's a private one, I won't read out the name, would be keen on finding more about ST1 interest in education. How can you convert your passion to income? Would be keen in chatting more. Yes, of course, just email me and I'd be more than happy. And I think, you know, you guys are very talented. Like, you've trained so hard to get to where you are. And actually, it's very easy to create a career that you really love. It's just, you've got to just find what you love doing and incorporate that into your clinical roles. And I think I didn't know that as an ST. I just kind of thought, okay, I'm going to work and do these sessions and stuff. But then the more I started to think about, no, well, I want to love my job and I want to enjoy what I'm doing and I want to do these things. And I did research it, and I do a separate talk on portfolio careers, and I've got really great case studies who do live videos for me on it. So Nikki Kanani, a GP who does deep GP dermatology with special interest, BMA people, lots of different people. So I'm happy to come back and do that. But I've got school pickup soon, so I can't do that for you guys today. Mummy duties call. Okay, someone else has said, was extremely useful. Okay, so if there's anything else you're confused on, just post in the chat now. You can private message me and I'm happy to answer. I think the main key points for you guys that I definitely say, and this is based on my own experience, and obviously I do this talk a lot. For the ST1s, I'd say really look at your training as an opportunity to work out what you love doing in general practice and how you're going to take that forward in your general practice career. So I, as an ST, I fumbled my way through this. So I started to write for Pulse as an ST2 because I randomly saw an email that went out. You know, all these emails you get from Deanery and HEE, and I just normally just delete it. I would look at them, and there was one just saying, oh, if you're going to go into registrar year and you want to write about your experience or whatever, just email us. And that wasn't paid work initially. I am paid for it now, but I just thought, oh yeah, I do like writing. I'll just give that a try. And then in my ST3 year, I did a dermatology rotation. Sorry, ST2 year, I did a dermatology rotation. And I thought, oh, I might be interested in doing a bit of aesthetics. So I did that, and I did that for a few years. I don't do it anymore, but, I just kind of tried. Oh, someone's saying my email address. Sorry, I thought that was on there. Let me put it down here. nhs.net. So I put my email address. Sorry, I thought that was on there. And then, so my advice for ST1s are like, just really use this time to shape what you enjoy doing. Use your study budgets on things that will progress you emotionally and personally. Don't just think, oh, I better do this course because I better do it. No, do what you enjoy doing and fit that around your general practice interest. For the ST2s, I think really think about your ST3 year as being the experience you want to shape how you go forward. So email your local CCG, your LMC, or what other things you're interested in. And I I did a lot of that and just did, not work experience, but I went and I shadowed people. I spoke to a lot of people, and there were things I did initially that I did for a year or two maybe, and then I thought, okay, I'm over that now. I don't want to do that anymore. And then I did other things, but I've done a lot of things, and by doing all those things, I've worked out what it is that I really, really enjoy. And I think it's nice to just have a varied experience. So, what else were you guys saying? So, okay, and for ST3s, I'd say some of you have jobs sorted, others in your private messages were unsure. And I'd say, look, just start, honestly, go on to NHS Choices, just Google find NHS GP, and it's, I think, the first or second one that comes up. Start contacting practices now. Don't wait until August, because recruitment has been slightly put on hold because of COVID. So I think if you're first to the post, so you can just say, look, I'm a local GP, I'm on this scheme, I work under Dr. So-and-so, I'm looking for a salaried or locum role in August, here are my documents, I'll send you my CCT certificate when I get it. I'd love to come and have a chat about what you guys do at the practice, and just start those conversations now, and you'll get a feel for the place and you'll get known, and then you can start kind of building on that kind of when you leave. Do not leave it till post, even if you're going to take a month or two off, which is fine, don't leave it until August, because it's just going to stress you out. And I know from doing a lot of these talks that a lot of trainees and a lot of GPs are actually proactively contacting practices now. So I want you guys to do that too, kind of in your local area. Someone said, can I have a copy of the slides? Okay, I'll have to check that. So I don't tend to give mine out because I've got my children's photos on there and stuff, but to be honest, all my content is in this booklet, this online booklet. It covers all the stuff I talked about, finding work, all the links, what documents you need to work, what to do on the day, your doctor's bag. It's got everything on there, so I definitely signpost you to that. I'll check with Colin and see what he says about his slides, and if I can send them to you guys, I definitely will. Okay, great. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that was helpful, and send me your email, send me your emails for those that have private messaged me and want to know a few more additional things. And I wish you all the best. I'll send you kind of all the resources. And lots of people asking about portfolio roles and stuff. So, do you know what? I can do the portfolio webinar for you. I'll ask your administrator to carve out time, because that covers all the different topics. Other people are saying, how do I sign up to MLM? Okay, so that's as a private message as well. So you just put in the email address. So if you're a first 5 GP, the RCGP have negotiated a discount for you guys. So just let me know that you've just CCT'd, and I'll add it to that CV template. Good point. Someone just put about that. That's on the resources page of my local manager. So I'll just go to resources /resource. Can't spell at the moment. Resources, and you'll be able to download that CV template there. So sorry, yes, I forgot to mention that. Great. Okay, well, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Got to go do the school run now, but I will send you all the resources. I'm happy to answer your questions, and we can sort out a portfolio one in the next few weeks or so. Great. Thanks so much. Bye.